Hello and welcome to the Mal&Johnny Show. Croeso, willkommen, guten Tag, good day, bore da, pronoun da. We're talking languages this afternoon. Now then, Johnny Tudor, you're a man of many talents. Obviously, we know that you can act, we know that you can tap dance, but languages, how many do you speak at the moment?
Well, counted English, 3. I speak Welsh and I speak Spanish.
Right.
When I say I speak Spanish, I'm still learning Spanish because I don't think you ever finish learning, do you? You learn different words and so on and so forth. I can hold a good conversation in Spanish. ¿Qué tal? Muy bien, no hay problema para mí. Es importante hablar con la gente en las calles.
It is really important because you've spent a lot of time traveling around the world, but going to Spain on holidays and all that, it is very easy just to speak,
Well, what I do, when I started, I used to go to Malaga because I found it was more Spanish than the Costas, okay? A lot of people fly to Malaga and they go down to Puerto Banús or they go to Torremolinos and all the way to speaking English. So I wanted to be amongst the proper Spaniards, so I went to Malaga.
Lovely.
Thinking it would be easy. But the thing on Malagueñans and Malagan, they speak with a very strong accent.
Oh,
it's
right.
Like somebody from Bangor speaking Welsh compared to somebody from Swansea speaking Welsh, for instance. It's different.
Yes.
It's the same words.
Yes.
But they tend to abbreviate a lot. So like Buenos Dias becomes Buenos. And hasta luego becomes Luego. See?
Brilliant.
And they leave all the S's out. So I got used to it now, so I'm okay.
Okay, so then, growing up in Wales and then travelling around, obviously English was the only language you had as a child growing up? Any other languages around?
Yeah, the only time... Well, I heard Welsh because my grandfather was a Welsh speaker from North Wales, although he lived in South Wales. And if I went into his house, he'd have the Welsh news on, see? And he'd say, don't understand it. There's Stu John Bach. I said, no, I don't. So I wish he was alive now to see if I can actually speak his language, the language of heaven, he used to call it.
Yes, yeah.
And anyway, so I decided... I used to do a lot of Welsh programs. Mm-hmm. When I first started TV, my first TV shots were in the Welsh language, although I just learnt the songs as a parrot and just learnt it. I could obviously pronounce it, being from Wales. And like us all kids, we used to sing Calon Lan and things in school, so I could do it. So they just used to give me these translations. I used to do on a pop show called Disco Down, it was. Remember that?
I do.
I used to translate all the pop songs of the day, Winchester Cathedral became Glock Bach and the Regloister. See, I didn't understand it. I'd be wandering about the beach trying to learn these songs every week. Oh, it'd give me murder. So Meredith Evans, who was the head of Light End at the time, said, John, you should go and learn, I said, okay. And I did the Ulpan course. Now, I think you did it, didn't you?
Did the Ulpan course as well, yeah.
Yeah, because Chris Rees, the bloke that started the Ulpan course in Wales, he went to Israel because it's an Israeli form of teaching.
Right.
And in fact, Ulpan is a Hebrew word meaning studio.
Oh.
And he went over there because, as you realize, Jewish people from all over the world go to Israel, and they're not that illiterate, some of them, so you can't give them the pluperfect, and this is the verb. They just taught them like children. So, for instance, they give you a whole sentence. Well, you know this because you've done it yourself. So they say, "Mae fachgen da." So you think, right, he's a good boy. They wouldn't tell you why it was fachgen instead of bachgen. Mm-hmm. It's what they call a soft mutation. It comes naturally to the fellow in the street because they just say it. Mm. They explained us the grammar after they taught us how to speak.
Right, yeah.
So that's what I did.
Now then, you had
3 months.
you had the added advantage. And actually, so let me tell you about my growing up. Then my first language was Welsh. Because my parents are both teachers, so I spent my my formative years, those early 2 or 3 years, with my grandparents, Myfanwy and George Griffiths, whose first language was Welsh. So I'm told by those who knew me at the time.
That's my maiden name, Griffiths.
Oh.
John Tudor Griffiths is my name.
There we are. Great. Well, we're probably related. I got a feeling there's something there. And apparently people can remember me, shouting for things yn Gymraeg from my high chair. But Welsh wasn't terribly popular when I was growing up. It wasn't an advantage to speak Welsh. There was the Welsh language school, but they had a terrible football team. I mean, that's, and when you're 9, 10, 11 years old, that's pretty important, isn't it? So I didn't go to a Welsh language school. And I forgot, John. I lost the language. So by the time I got to the Ulpan course, I knew the sound. I was just hoping it must be there somewhere that it would kickstart in. But the advantage that you had that I didn't have is that you have a Welsh speaker in the house.
I have a Welsh-speaking wife who's from Carnarvon, so her first language was Welsh.
Yeah.
Well, no, she's bilingual. She had both at the same time. Her father spoke English to her, and her mother spoke Welsh to her.
Right.
So she had the two at once. So it just sunk in, of course.
Yeah.
But having said that, I started learning before Owen and I actually got together.
Right.
Because I was doing Disco Down back in 67, 68, something like that. So I didn't meet Owen until the 70s. But it was a help later on, obviously.
Yeah.
But I dabbled with Welsh learning for quite a while before I actually did the Opan. Yeah. And the Opan is what did it. Because it concentrated. It was immersion.
And it is immersion, isn't it? Because if you go into a kibbutz to learn Hebrew on their Ulpan courses, everybody speaks that language. In Wales, what I found was that people were ever so helpful. If I was struggling, they'd speak to me in English, and I'm going, no, don't speak to me in English. I want you to speak to me in Welsh. So I have to think about it.
The thing is, I don't know if you say it wasn't popular. It wasn't popular because the Victorians tried to stamp it out. Mm-hmm. They had a thing called the Welsh Knot. I'm sure you know what that means. There was for people who don't know, when kids were in school and they was found caught speaking Welsh back in the day, they were given a rope around their neck with a big piece of wood on it which said not speak Welsh. So it was the Welsh Knot. Mm-hmm. And then if he caught another kid speaking it, he could get rid of it and give it to him. And the last kid in the class would get a thrashing. Wow. So, it was a terrible thing to do to children because their house language would have been Welsh.
Yeah,
and it started eroded a bit, but thank God for the Welsh Language Society who pushed it again, and now it's more popular than ever because there's more Welsh schools and English families are sending their kids to Welsh schools because it's a very old Celtic language. It's one of the oldest in Europe.
Yeah.
And you don't want to lose a culture just because the Victorians didn't like it.
No, and then and the other thing you're saying about is that whether you say bachgen, depends where it is in a sentence and what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Now then, getting your mutations correct. In the old days, actually, when I started, I suppose maybe in Welsh television, there was proper Welsh. I knew a lot of Welsh speakers, natural Welsh speakers, who were say, "Well, I don't speak it properly." I'm saying, "Well, of course you do." And they say, no, I don't speak proper Welsh. And it could actually put people off at the beginning, isn't it? That's having to speak it properly. Eisteddfod Welsh.
Well, the thing is, I think a lot of Welsh people that say that, it's an inferiority complex. Of course, these people, perhaps their dialect is different from mine or from Olwen's, whatever, but it's still Welsh. And they've got to get over this. They are Welsh speakers,
Yes.
Because a lot of people say to me, I'm not going to learn Welsh, they're taking the mickey out of me. They don't take the mickey out of you. Ronnie Williams used to take the mickey out of it. Do you remember Ronnie, Ryan and
Ronnie, yes.
Well, you know as I do. There's no one way of saying yes and no, is there? No. You have to repeat the verb. Oes te yn y tebod? Oes. Oes te nag oes. Right. Ydych chi'n mynd? Nag ydw. Right. So there's all these different ways of speaking yes and no. So I walked in one day to the club and I said, "Shemai, Ron, sit my peth." And he went, "Oes." I thought, taking the mickey out of me. But I could take it because I knew him well and all that. But I found them very helpful. The boys would speak to me in the beeb, and tell me things, and you got to speak to people. That's it.
Yeah, and you think about America. You think about the people from Watts in LA or on the Bronx. They speak. They sort of speak English.
Different English.
It is. It's all very different, but it's all accepted. And
that's right.
And maybe I think that's happened more and more in Wales, isn't it? People are just pleased that you're actually making the effort. And and there's nothing more lovely. Particularly, I want to go to West Wales. Obviously there's a concentration in Cardiff now and bits and bobs in Swansea, but you go to West Wales and it's very sort of relaxed Welsh. And you can have a little chat. You mix a bit of English as well. And there's nothing better than having gone through a whole conversation in a shop or a cafe or something, and Gymraeg. It's fantastic.
Well, this is the first time I went up to do a show in Pwllheli in the Butlins camp. It was the summer season, and I stayed near Carnarvon because I rented a little cottage. And I'm in the square there one day, and the phone went in the phone box, right? And there was nobody around. So I thought, I better answer this phone. You don't know, it might be important. So I answered the phone, and the voice said, Shemai, ydy dau o gwmpas? No, I knew what he meant, but it was taken for granted.
Yes.
Because I was in Carnarvon and I could speak Welsh, because most people in Carnarvon can either understand it or speak it fluently.
Yeah.
And I loved that, because as you say, you go in the shop, you can ask for a pound of butter, or you can ask for a loaf of bread in Welsh, and it's a proper language. It's a usable, living language, you know.
Yeah. Was Di about? Did you find him?
But I didn't find Di. There was nobody there.
He wasn't a gumpus at all.
No, you don't go past.
All right. So, and then I used to get a bit frightened about, well, I can't learn to speak any other languages. But what I found was, when I went, particularly going on tour, and on one tour, the one I did with Art Garfunkel, you know, we spent, I think it was 3 months in Germany. Particularly in Eastern Germany as well, where people could speak English, but they didn't. Why should they? It's their country. Right. The only, having said that, I'm sure you noticed the same thing. When we went to Hong Kong with Max Boyce, and when we went to Germany, all the road crews' English consisted of every curse and every swear word. That's right.
Everything. That's right. All languages say that.
to like these Chinese boys putting the gear up in Hong Kong. I mean, it was like being back home, but in the pub on a Saturday night. But I was frightened. But you know, when you're totally immersed in it, that's when languages really come to life, don't they?
That's right. That's right. I mean, I funny about Germany. I used to do the American bases in Wiesbaden. And there was, I mean, the only thing I learned was, was is low schnucky pussy. How's it going, my lovely? Which was very helpful at the time.
Of course it
was. And I said to one girl, I said, was is los? She said, the hund is los. The dog is loose. Which is, it's lovely, because she was taking the mickey out of me. Yeah. But I mean, language. I mean, I found Spanish more akin to Welsh, not the way the sentences are constructed.
Right.
Like we say in Welsh, don't we? Black cat, black, not black cat.
Yes.
And it's very similar in Spanish. So it helped me in that way, the actual form. They've also got two ways of knowing someone and knowing something, as we have in Welsh, nabod and gwybod.
Yes.
They've got the same in Spanish. And they've got the masculine and the feminine, which we've got in Welsh.
Yes.
So there's a lot of parallels.
Yes,
You should try Spanish.
I should try. I was watching an interesting program last night. Anthony Bourdain, sadly he's no longer with us, but he does travel programs and cookery programs. And he was in West Texas. And you'd have thought the people in West Texas would be very much keen on putting the wall up, you know, Donald Trump's wall. But what they were saying was, you know, there's this town in Texas and there's that town in Mexico. There's the Rio Grande in a way. And all of the Anglo farmers along that belt, they all speak Spanish and always have, and so do the Mexicans, because they're their neighbours. You know,
that's right.
And it was lovely to see that, you know, because they were interviewing people, and some of them were speaking English, some of them speaking Spanish. Everybody except me knew what was going on. But you know, languages can divide people, but they can also bring people together. Now in Spanish, when you go to Malaga, when you're down in the sunshine, how confident are you now that when you go out shopping?
Oh, I'm pretty confident now in most things. I mean, I wouldn't want to go into an in-depth conversation about politics, but I can speak ordinary Spanish to people. I can say, well, most things really. I mean, you know, when I go now to my hotel, when I arrive, I'm going now, next week I'm off to Malaga.
Lovely.
And I'm going to say, tengo una reservación para 5 días. I've got a reservation for 5 days. Donde está mi... and I you know, whatever, I can do it.
Yeah.
And I don't feel, I like doing it because I like what comes back. You know,
it's just a lovely feeling. I learned to do my introduction in every country I went to, whether Sweden, France, Germany, all those different countries. I learned to do my introduction in their language. So, Goedenavond, mijn damen en heren, welkom. Ik heet Malpoop. Mijn naam is Malpoop. Spraken Sie English bitte? You know, so it was like a bit of a giggle, but it was like.
But they like it.
People appreciated it. The only country that didn't go down terribly well was France. Obviously,
they're terrible. They just like, you know, don't speak French. They don't like you. I did a gig in Monte Carlo,
right?
And in my act, in the contract, I had to sing an Italian song because it was right near the border, and the Italians came, and I had to sing a French song. That was in my contract.
Right.
So my agent's wife was French, so she taught me how to say the French perfectly. Thank God.
Yeah.
And the Italian I learned from a lady down the road. She was from Sicily, right? So I'm singing this Italian song, la vita più bello della vita, right? And this waiter comes out and he said, "Are you from Sicily?" I must have been using her accent, you see.
That's great.
But we were sat in the restaurant one day because we could eat in the casino because we were the workers, although we were doing the cabaret. So me and the band, we sat in the little restaurant, and this woman used to come up. We called her Lily Marlene. She used to turn up with the menu, and she'd go, just wait for a seat. So she didn't like us, okay? So my guitar player, Spider-Man, we called him. He's a great guitar player. I don't know why we call him Spider-Man. Anyway, he could speak French. I said, will you tell her, please, that we are working here the same. So we had to go at her. Next day, she was all smiles because he could speak French to us. But they are a bit funny about that, the French, aren't they?
Yeah. But, I suppose it's our fault. Well, of course it's our fault because we go into these countries and expect, them to speak English. When to Prague, I'd say the other day, it was a year last January. It just seems like the other day. What happened in the meantime? Yeah. Oh, yeah, we got in lockdown. But I went out there and I wanted to do all the introductions, like with the orchestra, because they were all completely Czech speaking. We had an interpreter, but I wanted to say hello. I wanted to say, so thank you, and all that, and obviously with Polish it's dzień dobry. It's like you want to. It's just a little bit of a connection. How? Right then. So you do English, Welsh, and Spanish, but you got to keep it up, haven't you? You've got to keep. You've got to
keep it up. I got a girl I speak to every week on Zoom from Pamplona, although she lives in Cardiff. But she does this thing called Hola Cardiff, and she teaches Spanish over Zoom. So we speak for an hour. We don't speak one word of English for an hour, all Spanish. And then she corrects me if some of my grammar's wrong, and she gives me some homework. So you've got to keep it going.
Yeah.
But talking about introductions, I did a ship once called the Song of Flower. It was a little yacht, again, another one, and it was coming out of Tokyo.
Right.
And it went to Vladivostok, and it went over to, it was over. And all the passengers were Japanese.
Right.
Okay. They couldn't speak English.
Yeah.
So I had an interpreter. We had two, Rumi and a Zumi, two interpreters. So I'd have her on the stage and we said, right, they love Western music, the Japanese. They love it. So there's no problem with singing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I said, will you, Zumi, tell him now I'm going to do an impression of Tom Jones. So she goes, Tom Jones. So I do it. And I said, no, tell him I'm going to tap dance. Tap dance. It was like a Benny Hill sketch. But did you ever go to Japan?
Never been to Japan. But I need.
Tokyo is a great place.
Oh, I know. Well, I was watching some program on the art of Japan the other day, and Monty Don going out to the Japanese gardens. I really would.
I saw that. Fantastic.
Yes, and my daughters went out there for and my son-in-law went out there for the Rugby World Cup, and they came back with tremendous stories. So one day I'll go there. I'm not sure whether I'll learn Japanese, but I'll learn the introduction to whatever my gig I'm doing. I'll learn the introduction. But now then, so. When I went to Spain with Art Garfunkel again, I'm practicing. Right, I've got the introduction. I was telling the promoter, this is what I'm going to. He went, no. So if I say, like good evening or good night in Spanish is.
Buenas noches.
Buenas noches. Buenas noches.
Buenos tardes is afternoon.
Yeah, but if you're in Barcelona, of course it's Catalonians. So like I was going to. He said no. And he said, "Buena noite." I think it's been a while.
Yeah, buena noite. Yeah. No, that's. I think that's Portuguese. But then Catalonian is a bit like a mixture of French, Spanish, Portuguese. It's a bit of a mixture of a lot of things.
Yeah, but I did it. Yeah, and I learned the whole sentence. And they went wild. I mean, they hated the music, obviously. They booed me off afterwards. But they were delighted that I didn't speak to them, in Spanish, but I spoke to them in Catalan. It was, it just opens the door, doesn't it? Particularly when you're entertained.
I made a mistake of actually going and doing a Spanish course in Barcelona once.
Right.
Which was daft because I did. It's a bit like Wales, Barcelona. They've got two languages side by side,
Yeah.
I mean, they all speak Spanish. Don't worry about that. But like you'd see in Mercado is Mercat. Yes. It's slightly similar.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's different. And they use Zs and things which they don't use X's, which they don't use much in Spanish. But
yeah. Well, now that odd languages, that sounds terrible. Every language is normal to the people who speak it. But my son's girlfriend is Portuguese.
All right.
Now, Portuguese, it's almost like Russian, isn't it? It sounds almost like Russian.
Do you know what? When you read it, you can almost understand it if you can speak Spanish, but to listen to it, it's totally different.
Yeah.
isn't it? Yes. As you say, like Russian, or Daj bomba, Daj boa.
Yeah.
It's very different.
Wow.
I mean, there's a couple of blokes working in a restaurant in Cardiff. It's a Spanish restaurant, but there's a couple of Portuguese guys. They can understand Spanish, but their language is totally different.
Yeah.
And yet, it's all the same roots. It's all Spanish, Italian, and Portuguese are all from the Latin.
They're all romantic languages.
Now, Greek is totally different.
Yeah.
Don't know where Greek comes from. But
it's all Greek.
Different roots altogether.
Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing. And of course,
very interesting.
The Romans, the Roman elite, often used to speak not Spanish. They used to speak Greek. They'd write in Greek. Marcus Aurelius, I think, the emperor.
Yeah.
You can tell I've been listening to a lot of podcasts lately. I think he wrote all of his sayings in Greek.
Well, the Greeks were there were scholars, weren't they? The Greeks.
Scholars, yes, all the philosophers.
Blinking neck languages. But I'm going to be over in Malaga now in a couple of weeks. I'm going to be speaking Spanish to them.
No.
When you stood next to somebody in a bus stop and you ask the lady, ¿Dónde está la catedral? And she says, ahí, detrás, te entiendo, and you're having a conversation, and it gives you that lip. Yeah. It's the same when I learned Welsh. Once I could get a couple of sentences out, and I was actually holding a conversation, you feel a bit of pride, you know.
Yeah, fantastic. And anybody, which language are there any more on the agenda that you'd like to learn? Or have you got the set that you need?
I don't think I can cram any more words in my head. Because when I'm speaking Welsh, sometimes I say a Spanish word in the middle of it. And vice versa. Because the brain is on a different trajectory, do you know what I mean?
It is weird. I often say that I speak Welsh, but through the medium of English. I'm sure my sentences sound
you
Welsh.
said you did the old band course. Did you do the full course?
Did the full course, got to the end. I think I got a certificate as well, but
But you can siarad Cymraeg now, then?
Gallu siarad tipyn bach o Gymraeg, couldn't you? Well, but dwi'n swilio, nervous, but shy, but,
Yeah, swill.
Yeah, but
that's the trouble with lots of people learning any language. They become shy. They can write it down academically. They're okay. They know the grammar, but they won't speak.
Yeah.
But now my son-in-law, when he was a kid, because his parents were both teachers, they have 6 weeks a year, every year, or 7 weeks, in Spain. So him as a kid, we playing with his kids in the street. Yeah. He can speak perfect Spanish, but don't ask him what the grammar is, because he wouldn't be able to tell you. But the most important thing is that he can actually converse.
Yeah, isn't that brilliant?
You know what I mean? People get snobs about languages. They shouldn't. They just talk it.
Yeah, and I used to love, because we used to watch Heddiw, Hywel Gwyn, Bryn Bion, Tan nos o fori, hwyl. You know, and I still use that. I think of Hywel when Tan nos o fori. Well, tan wythnos nesa.
Tan tro nesa. Bryn Williams. Do you remember dear old Bryn Williams?
Oh, I love Bryn. Singer and a comedian, yeah.
Yeah, well, Bryn Williams did a programme. His Welsh, what he'd say it himself, he's not with us anymore, but he wasn't the greatest Welsh. And he actually said that. Instead of saying, Tan nos o fori, he went, Tan y tro diwetha, to the last time I'll see you. He had it all out, the wrong text. And it was live, wasn't it?
Oh, well, there we are. All right, look, good stuff. Well, have a lovely trip. And if you're in, we should catch up in Malaga if we can get your phone to work or something.
Habla español contigo.
Hey, muchachos. Hey.
Well, what I'll have to do is, when I'm there, we'll do a podcast, but you'll have to put it out at a different time because somebody might rob my house when they... I'll put the alarm on.
Now then, I'm trying to think now my Spanish, most of it was learned from Western, so muchachos, hey!
Muchachos.
Arrivederci. That's Italian.
I'll never forget, I said, no problema, right? My teacher went berserk. No, there's no hay problema. You must use the verb. No problema is gringo speak.
El gringo. Well, from the gringos, hey, have a lovely trip. It's goodbye from him and
it's buenos días. No, what do they say? They say hasta luego.
Hasta luego.
Hasta pronto.
Yeah.
See you soon.
See you soon. Take care. God bless. Bye-bye.
Ta-da.